Okay, so let's start with a big question. What if the way we've all been taught to think about world politics is based on a flawed model? Today, we're going to unpack what you could call the global playbook. The rules that decide how countries interact. We'll dive into the dominant theory, and then we'll see why looking back at history reveals it might be totally off base. This is really the question at the heart of it all, isn't it? Is the world just this constant struggle for power, all about who's got the biggest economy or the strongest army? Or is there something else going on, something deeper that maybe we tend to overlook? For a long time, the main answer to that question has been to see the world as a game of billiard balls. It's a very mechanical view of things. It's inspired less by history or culture and a lot more by something like classical physics. Right, so just picture the entire world as a giant pool table. Every single nation is a billiard ball. They're solid, they've got a certain weight, you could call that their power, and they just move around bumping into each other based on pure force. A big, powerful country hits a smaller one, and the smaller one, well, it moves. It's simple, it's predictable, and it's all about material power. And this quote from Hendrik Sprout just nails it. This whole perspective, sometimes it's called a Newtonian view, boils everything down to one thing: the balance of power. So in this model, a country's beliefs, its culture, its unique history, nope, none of that really matters. The only thing that counts is its size, its economic muscle, and its military strength. Okay, but here's the thing. While that model is clean and simple, it often ends up being a map that just doesn't match the actual world. The moment you start looking at real history, this whole billiard ball theory starts to wobble and kind of fall apart. So let's really put it to the test. If global politics is just a game of physics, right, driven entirely by the balance of power, then its predictions should be pretty solid. Well, let's take a look at one of the biggest power shifts in all of modern history and see what happens. And this is where the theory just completely breaks down. A core prediction of this model, something called Great Power Transition Theory, said that as the United States was rising and Great Britain was declining, a gigantic war between them was basically inevitable. But look at what really happened. A peaceful handover of power. So why? Well, it wasn't about power, it was about ideas. Both countries shared a vision for the world built on liberalism, on a common culture. And those are factors the billiard ball model literally has no way to measure. So this brings us to a much more interesting way of seeing things. What if international orders aren't just these mechanical systems? What if they're actually social systems, built from the ground up on shared ideas and common understandings? The key idea here is something we can call collective beliefs. I want you to think of it like the shared playbook that all the players on the field have sort of implicitly agreed to use. It's not about who can push the hardest. It's about a shared story, a common understanding of how the world is supposed to work, who gets to have authority, and what the ultimate goals even are. I absolutely love this metaphor from the sociologist Max Weber. He said ideas are like railway switchmen. Now, they don't provide the engine's power. That's a nation's material interests, its economy, its military. But the switchmen, they're the ones who decide which track that powerful engine is going to run on. In other words, our beliefs actually define what we even consider to be our own interests in the first place. And to really see this idea in action, we have to step outside of our modern Western-centric view. For centuries, other parts of the world were running on completely different playbooks. Systems that make absolutely no sense if all you're thinking about is billiard balls. So let's head to our first example, the East Asian system that was centered around China. For hundreds of years, this entire region had way less war than Europe. And it wasn't because of some perfect balance of power. It was because of a shared cultural and political playbook. So what did this playbook look like? Well, at its very core was a shared Confucian belief in hierarchy. You can see here that other states would pay tribute to the Chinese emperor. But this wasn't just raw power, it was a cultural ritual. By taking part, smaller states got legitimacy, they got access to trade, all within a shared civilization. And the result, as you can see, was far less war than in Europe at the time. It was an order built on culture, not on constant conflict. All right, now let's jump to another huge part of the world, a region stretching all the way from the Ottoman Empire to Mughal India. Here, the big organizing idea wasn't a single central power. It was a shared religious and legal identity that tied everyone together. So in this case, the playbook was built on the concept of the Ummah, the global community of all believers.
As you can see, empires that were often political rivals were still connected by these really powerful shared ideas. They followed a common Islamic law, Sharia, which gave them a foundation for social order, and they shared this high culture where a language like Persian was often used for diplomacy. Their world was ordered by a shared faith.
Now for our third example, and this one is maybe the most fascinating of all. In parts of Southeast Asia, the entire international order was a direct reflection of a shared understanding of the cosmos itself. This might be the most different playbook we've looked at. Here, power wasn't about clear, fixed borders on a map. Instead, it was organized in what's called a mandala system. Think of a series of concentric circles of influence, all radiating out from a central ruler. And that ruler was seen as a divine king, a mirror of the very center of the universe. So politics, alliances, even the way they built their cities, it was all shaped by these shared cosmic beliefs.
So, why does any of this matter today? Why take this tour of ancient and non-European systems? Because, and this is the important part, it reveals something really profound about our own world and the way we've been taught to think about it.
And here it is, maybe the biggest takeaway of the day. That billiard ball view, the idea that politics is just a game of mechanical forces. It isn't some universal law of science. It is itself a collective belief system. It was born in a very specific time and a very specific place, modern Europe, and it's just one playbook among many, many possible ones.
The philosopher Hans-Georg Gadamer put this so beautifully. He said that when we study these different historical worlds, we don't just learn about them. We learn about ourselves. We run right into the limits of our own perspective, and by doing that, we expand our own horizon of what's possible to understand. Which leaves us with a really crucial question for right here, right now. If world orders are truly built on shared ideas and not just on brute force, then what are the core beliefs that are shaping our global playbook today? And maybe even more importantly, are we sure they're the right ones?